I haven't done one of these. Oh, I haven't done one of these for a while, so I'm a little bit rusty, but it's great to be back. Alex is already waving, which is lovely. But yeah, welcome everybody. I think, yeah, we can have cameras on at the beginning, and then once we kind of get started, it's nice to just see people's faces and say hello. I'm going to put gallery mode on so I can see some lovely faces. Hello, everyone. And then when we get started, we'll turn cameras off just to make it the bandwidth and all that. But really amazing to see lots of familiar faces. And yeah, thanks for coming today. So before we get started, I always do sort of intro, which is what the Finborough Forum is. So as you probably all know, but sometimes there's new faces or a new person who's joined. But this is an opportunity just to get together. Started off with writers, but now we also have directors and producers, all sorts. And it's just a chance to get together without having to like workshop our scenes or do stuff like that, and be sociable. Kind of sociable on Zoom. Usually we go to the bar afterwards. Hopefully that comes back soon. But also just to listen to really amazing people from the industry, and just to learn and reflect and chat. So yeah. So today we've got a very special guest, and I'll do a little introduction. And then I'll start asking questions. But our guest today is, I was going to say Alexandra Cory, but well, it is Alexandra Cory, otherwise known as Alex, who is an agent from Berlin Associates. But full disclosure before we start, Alex is actually my agent, and that's why she's so special. She's special for lots of other reasons, but over the last few years, when people come and say, "Oh, do you know any good agents?" I'm always like, "Oh my God, well, my agent, obviously," and I'm always recommending her. And then more recently, as the years have gone by, I hear lovely things about her from other writers. But yeah, very, very well loved by probably a few people in this room as well who you might know, but by me especially. And I'm really, really honored to have her as my guest. I'm going to give her a good grilling. But yeah. Oh yeah, one more announcement. Sorry, before we start. This is being recorded. So if you don't want to appear at all, do turn off your cameras. But yeah, and probably everyone turn off their cameras now and make sure you're muted, because we're going to begin in earnest. But lovely to see everyone, albeit briefly. Great. That's it from me. Welcome, Alex. Amazing to have you.
Hi, thanks for having me. Nice to see everyone.
So just getting started with the usual question we ask everyone, is just how you got started. How does one become an agent? What drew you to the role, and how did you get here?
Yeah, it's a really hard one, because it's one of those ones that I'm sure all the writers and directors and sort of anyone who's not a performer basically on this Zoom will recognize that you often, you know of actors, you know of the acting job, but all of the behind the scenes stuff isn't taught or sort of pushed to people that often. So I went to university in Edinburgh, and Edinburgh obviously has the Edinburgh Fringe all year, not all year, every year, and the uni there has its own sort of student run theatre. So I was lucky enough that I knew I wanted to do something in arts. I got heavily involved in that, so it meant that I basically got to do a lot of experience before leaving university and getting into a territory where I would have only been fit for unpaid internships because I had no skills. But I just loved new writing, and I think I got, when I was there was a thing at uni where students didn't write their own plays. It was just sort of assumed you don't write your own plays, you put on work. And I remember when I had a position to like run a new writing festival during the spring one year, I was like, well, we should make it a new writing festival because none of us are fucking doing it. So let's get it done and let's see what we can do, and we'll all be in it together. And like since then, I sort of have always loved supporting people and sort of hang-hold it. And like I wrote my own play at university as well. And so I very much, oh yeah, it's awful. No one will ever see the light of day of it. But it was such a useful experience to go through and be like, oh my God, this is how naked you feel when you put something up on stage. So the whole experience was always something that I've been interested in. And then I met my boss, Matt Connell at Berlin Associates, at one of the fringes, because I think I was the token student producer on Theatre Uncut back in its very first iteration. Oh God, I don't even know what year. I was going to say 2017, but it was way earlier than that. And not the Lyceum, the Travis brought it to the Fringe to show the sort of upper middle class elderly audience what the students were getting up to, and I was the token producer, and Matt represented one of the writers on it, and so we just chatted about writing and stuff like that, and I was lucky enough that he knew me. He could send me the advert when a job for an assistant agent, junior agent came up. So for years I went through my life being like, oh my God, I was so lucky, and I was lucky, but I'd also done a lot of preparation and a lot of like making sure I was ready for when that opportunity came to me. So I've sort of reframed that. So I recognize that it was fucking hard work, working every single Fringe for 4 years and writing your own play. Guys, it's hard.
Super hard. I really need to read this play, but
no.
Okay,
edit that out, delete.
You were still a student basically when you kind of first, and then you went straight into becoming an agent and moving down to the big city.
Yeah, and I was really lucky because Berlin Associates has always just been like, you're here to help find new voices. It's very much you get to make your own choices. Obviously doing all of the other work that was assisting as well, and but given that sort of freedom to and trust within my voice and my understanding of voices that I like and think are popular, which has been such a gift. Like I like every Sunday I'm like, yeah, I get to go to work on Monday.
It's amazing. And talking about work and how amazing it is, just sort of more practical question. We often ask like, oh, what does an agent actually do? But maybe a little bit of a flip side to that question is like, what does an agent not do? Like, what are the kind of big misconceptions that people tend to have about what an agent can achieve or what an agent actually does?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff in films and media that give agents a bad rap, and it's often actors agents in American like TV shows, like episodes or something, that give you the bad rap. And we don't represent actors at Berlin Associates, so I cannot possibly comment. And I've got loads of clients at the minute being like, oh, have you watched Call My Agent? And I'm like, yes, but it's not like that.
I love that show.
Yeah, it's really good, but it's so different to what we do. So I think what I always say when I take on a new client about what agents don't do is it's not a magic wand, and it's not like taking the driving wheel for you. If anything, the metaphor I use is having an agent is like having a pit stop team. So you drive the car through, you're the one who's driving it in which direction you want to go in, but we're making sure that your wheels don't fall off and that sort of thing. So and it depends what you want from an agent as well, because there are some agents that can and will do dramaturgy for you if you don't have anyone out in the world yet who knows your voice and who you would be able to rely on more for that, or not if you know, and you don't have to do that. And yeah, I don't know, it's hard because the agent job is as much as you want to get out of it. Like, you get out what you put in. Like, I have some people that don't want me to do dramaturgy, don't want me to do XYZ, or some people that don't need stuff. So it's just sort of, it's finding that nice match where you work and push in the same direction as one another. But to answer the other side of your question, which I think is actually easier than the one you asked me, is what we do is, I would say it's a 3-tiered job. So we look after your contracts and make sure that you're not getting screwed over, that your rights are protected, blah, 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 blah. And that helps to be a nice middleman between you and the person that you need to be in the room with, having the artistic conversations with, but sometimes can't have a fight with money about. So you do that, you do the reading of the scripts and then the sort of networking. So everyone that I know, if my clients want to know, they can know, and everyone in my agency, if I want to know, I can. Do you know what I mean? So it's a web. You create this spider's web that you can like put your clients out into. And the third tier is the sort of support, because as anyone who's been a creative over the last year and a half will know this, but writers more so than ever, and always, it's a solitary job. So having someone who's on your team who can be there at the end of the phone when XYZ is happening or when nothing is happening, and just having someone who so you're not shouting into the darkness, and that is so important for your mental health at any time, but is a huge part of what the job is. I think like it's the majority of what you do.
Yeah, I can testify to that. And I guess, and this is the question that comes up with all sorts of different guests, and it's one of those questions that, because it's something that's so hard to define, we always ask again and again, is kind of, what draws you to a writer's voice? When do you read a play and you're like, oh, this is someone I want to represent, this is someone I believe in, or I see potential? Like, what is it exactly that you personally kind of look for, or what draws your attention?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's hard to say, and I'm going to be really annoying and sort of say very lofty things, but, and it is frustrating when people say this, but authenticity, like, I like to read a script where I feel as though someone has brought me something that the cry of the wolf in their soul, that they put it on their page, rather than, I think this is what people want, and this looks very much like whatever. Like, I've seen I May Destroy You, and therefore I've created my version. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can tell. And what also is really interesting about this job is everyone understands what's out there in the world already. Like, you've seen I May Destroy You, you've seen Fleabag, you've seen XYZ, like, what shows are out there. But as an agent, and probably as a literary manager, other people on this call will be able to attest to, is you get a sense of what isn't out there, but what the general feeling of the general public is, whether it's in what they want to write about, like loads of stuff about elections back when Brexit was happening. There'll be plenty of stuff about this time coming out, but also the sort of the rhythms of voices that you can get from different pockets of the country. Like, I used to swear hand on a Bible that if you gave me a script and you took away all the names and any locations in it, I'd be able to tell you that it was from Liverpool, or the writer was from Liverpool, because there was often like such a lyrical way of writing to it, and like at the time anyway, not wanting to adhere to any sort of form, like, but quite a rebellious in its form. So like being able to see stuff like that behind the scenes and allowing that to create this whole picture of what's out there, it does make it easier for you to tune into your taste and into voices that you think are either really their hand is on that honest kernel of what they can bring, or they're on their way to it. Because you don't have to be a fully polished, like, A-star writer, but there has to be something in there. There's, like, who was it? Steve Bell said, to be a writer, you have to write. And this idea that it's not just writing about what you know, in the, oh, I've been in a relationship with a three-legged goat, so therefore that's all I can write about. It's about writing about what you know in your heart, and that often means you can write about so many different stories, and just finding someone who feels like they've got to grips, they've saddled up their understanding of the world and what they want to say, and that can come through in so many different ways in different scripts. And similarly with directors, like, it doesn't always have to be in a script. You can get a sense that a director or even a designer has really worked out who they are and has worked out where they want to push that in the world.
Oh, great. And yeah, I feel really envious of you having that insight into this kind of world of all these scripts across the country. We focus a lot on writing, obviously that's kind of why the bulk of us are here, but we also have some directors, and you represent other sort of practitioners than just writers. And I know a few directors that you represent, and I've always been quite intrigued by the fact that some of them choose not to have an agent for a while, and they do. And I guess for the directors out there, and just kind of because it's interesting, and what is it that I guess an agent does for a director? Slightly, I'm sure some of it crosses over with writers, but also the second part of that question is, what gets you noticed as a director?
So with directors, I always sort of, please forgive the metaphor, guys, but I always sort of talk about it as if your baby deer. Like, I will not approach a director. I wait for directors to approach me, because right. Because they can do so much for themselves. And again, because of the sort of ecosystem of our industry, whether it is TV or theatre or film, a director really has to have a project before, like, you know what I mean? Like, a writer can write in isolation, a director can't direct in isolation. I mean, I guess there's other stuff that you can absolutely do, but so directors have that hustle nature. They'll have jobs in theatres, they'll do XYZ, and it's a lot more for them to sort of push forward and find out what they want to do and whatnot. So I always wait for directors to approach me, rather than trying to, because I think it would be impossible to try and hunt out those voices in directors until they were ready to have that, or they'd had some shows on. But I think, again, what I was saying, what gets you noticed with directing, unfortunately, you do have to have shows on, or at least have like something you can invite people to, because otherwise you're just being judged on how well you interview, and that's, you know what I mean, that's not really, you can't really do much for that. But the similar, what I do with directors once we do work together is again, look after them and make sure that they're, because I think directors often get sort of, you can't attach a director to a project in theatre in the way that you would with, like, say, film or something, and there's always that sort of risk of being shoved out. But just making sure that you sort of protect the whole package, and this is a problem that Stage Directors UK deal with, and are sort of trying to work out ways to build directors more securely into like rights packages and stuff like that, and it's not finished. But looking after your rights in terms of that, and make sure that you are getting paid, and that you're, if the show goes again and it's your direction, and you get paid for that, and just making sure people know your name. Like, I don't want to give away my huge trade secret, but I always say it's creating FOMO for writers and directors. It's creating FOMO. Even if people don't end up seeing your show, if it's something that's up in the Hebrides and it's very unlikely that someone from London will go and see it, it's creating that FOMO and making people think, oh, I keep hearing this person's name, like, who are they? I must work with them. That's how all producers speak like that.
Great. No, that's really interesting. And you've already touched upon this next question. You've talked, actually almost in every answer, you talked about support and being there. And so the question now is about, so the industry is a really tough place right now. I think everyone can agree on that, because of the last 18 months. Is it 18? Is it more? I can't remember, but you know what I mean. But it was always difficult, you know, that's the thing. I think it was always really challenging. And so then you have, you know, an additional sort of crazy challenge where everything stops, and all the other consequences. And you know, you are a very supportive agent, and as you've already demonstrated, and you know, everyone's had their ups and downs, and you've been extremely supportive of me, so I've experienced that. And I'm sure you're supportive of all your other clients. And I guess as someone like you've had this insight into all these different plays and what people are thinking about, you know, what are the biggest struggles and challenges that creatives are facing right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge question, and you could almost write a dissertation on it. And I'm sure, as you said, there'll be plenty of playwrights that will write and explore this. But I think the worst, no, that's not fair, because there's been so many awful things. But one of the really bad things about the last 18 months is that, and I think you've even said it to me at one point, like, how do you write for an audience that you don't know what that audience will look like? How do you write for a world that you don't know what it's going to look like? And that was the biggest thing that I saw across my list and other people, and even just people that you're speaking to that aren't creators but that work in the industry, is what, how, who, what, you know, like, there was nothing to aim for, because we didn't know what tomorrow was going to look like. And we didn't know what the industry was going to look like. And so it was that, and it's that thing that people go on about online all the time, being like, just because you wrote a novel in lockdown, that doesn't mean it's hard, like, it's like everyone should be, or like, we can just get out of bed and that's fine. And that's totally what it is. It's like this idea that you've been given free time, or you've been given this pause, you should be able to create. But as any creative, but specifically theatre writers, because that's who we're talking about right now and who I know about, how that, like, it's always a conversation. It's a conversation between a live audience and you as the playwright. How do you have that conversation in this moment in time? And everyone, if you haven't, then God bless you, but everyone that I know of has had this sort of like walking through sludge, like stuck, unable to see the wood for the trees. And then of course you go even bigger to like, the pandemic has just been the stress test on society, and so many things have come up and been wanting, right? And like the movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, that sort of got a louder, more publicized voice, I'd say, because obviously it exists before and it will exist afterwards. And that was a really painful moment for a lot of people, on all sides of the conversation. And it's shitty that it was a time when a lot of people were being initiated into the conversation, and a lot of people did a lot of learning, and unfortunately a lot of learning behind closed doors when you're on your own, and offices weren't open, so you couldn't do a round table and I think that increased a lot of people's pain. I'm hoping that a lot of good things will come out of that. And like, just to outline what we learned that yeah, we just sort of reevaluated how we deal with writers we don't represent, because we have a submissions policy that we were always very much like, we don't represent actors and we don't represent writers, and you need to do this and do that and blah, 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 because the amount of submissions, emails or phone calls you would get a day, it was sort of a way to survive. And then when we looked at that through the lens of was it last summer? Last summer, we were like, oh, fuck it, like, who cares if we get loads of phone calls from people that are like postmen in the Hebrides. I'm obsessed with the Hebrides today, who aren't realistic about writers. Like, let's make our submissions policy as open door as possible, like take away any reference to industry references, like bring it back down to what we actually do in the fucking office, which is making it all about the script. Doesn't matter, like you'll attest, like all of my clients will attest, most of them I took on with no credits to you whatsoever. Like it was like very, very, very early doors, and it is down to the script. So we sort of used that moment to look back at ourselves and see where we were wanting and change that. And I think a lot of people, a lot of the industry has done that. It's not at all perfect, but I think everyone's more comfortable having the conversation. But again, that's been really, really difficult for writers who are from the global majority, who have been lent on a lot more. And again, there's the conversations that we have all the time, and doesn't seem to get better. But that was another thing that people really, really struggled with last year, and will continue to struggle with, but hopefully in a less isolated way and in small steps forwards all the time. But yeah, it's been a mad year and a half.
And for you, you're doing all this supporting, and that's really hard. How does an agent, like, what's agent self-care look like?
Agent self-care is switching from wine to CBD drinks, honest to God. No, it's hard. I think a lot of the time, like, I spent the end of my first day back at work in January 2021 in bed crying by like 3 p.m. because I'd spent so much time making sure everyone knew that this is shit right now, but it's not shit forever. That I haven't had time to realize how shit it was and how much we'd lost, and like all of my clients are my babies. So anytime like stuff stops for you, it's like, my babies. So it was hard, but you had to sort of push that to the side. And then I mean, who was doing work on the 4th of January? It was fine. Cry in bed for 5 minutes.
That was one of the worst ones, I think.
Awful. Yeah, it was bad. But yeah, I don't know, self-care. I guess we might, like, I was talking to Sarah Dickinson about this the other day, the stories you tell yourself, as much as it's stressful and as much as it's hard and as much as it's work, not play, telling yourself a story that actually you don't have to do this, you get to do this. I get to have a phone call with this client, or I get to speak to a producer about a project that's like would be really cool if it ever went forwards, and the creative loves it, and blah blah blah. And I get to have a Zoom with like writers on a Monday. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just reframing it so that you take that stress and recognize that it's just part of a long hard day, and that you're actually really lucky. Oh no, I shouldn't say that though, because we always say that writers or creatives get told you should feel lucky and therefore don't take any money for it, but you know what I mean.
We've all been there. But thanks for sharing that, because like we were chatting earlier, I think it's really important for struggles and challenges to be shared, because often you can feel so alone in it, and when you know that everyone else is feeling that way, it's really empowering, and not empowering necessarily, I guess it's just a little bit of a relief, isn't it? To have that perspective. I'm gonna skip this one question. So in terms of questions, guys, so do think of the questions that you want to ask, because when I get to the end of my questions in the next sort of 5-10 minutes, it's going to be over to you. If you're feeling shy and you don't ask it yourself, you can just pop it in the chat, and we'll ask it for you. But yeah, going back to sort of I remember the first, when we had our first meeting, actually I was trying to find out when it was, so I looked in my old emails, and there was an email to Neil, and I was like, I've met this lovely person called Alexandra Cory, what do you think? And obviously he said, yeah, go for it. But and it was 2015, I think, so 6 years ago. But I remember that day really clearly. And I remember meeting you. And the first thought I was like, oh, wow, like we're almost the same age, I think. And I was like, oh, that's not what I was expecting. And then sitting down and connecting so much. And And I really always reflect on that moment, and I see it as sort of the beginning. And even, you know, it's always those moments where you think I've made it, and then you realize that, you know, there's no such thing. But that was one of those moments, and I sort of always think back to that moment when I look at sort of, you know, what's my journey been? And I guess for you, looking back to the early moments in your career when you started, which you covered in the first question back in Edinburgh, when you look back and you look back at your journey, you know, how has your career changed since those early days? What have been the biggest sort of changes? What are your reflections?
Yeah, my reflections, yeah, because we were talking about this earlier. I'm coming up to like 10 years with Berlin Associates, and because I've been at such a lovely company that have nurtured me and given me free reign, as like there is a lot to reflect on, and I similarly, like, obviously not with all of my clients, but a lot of them, you included, I do remember the first time I met you, or the first, I mean, I remember everyone's play that I went to see, but some of them particularly stand out, and they stand out because of that emotion of thinking, oh, I've met someone who I understand, like that voice, I'm so excited by that, and being able to follow my passion. And I always say that I'm the laziest agent in the world, because if I'm passionate about something, then it just makes it so much easier. Like the cogs turn, and know who you should talk to, who you should do this, what we should do, where you should go next, all that type of stuff. And being able to follow my passion as when it comes to voices has made my job a joy, and it made it really easy. But I guess the changes over the last 10 years are that it's going from me being this like little Yorkshire Terrier, like being like, my clients are so good and I love them, and I'm gonna go out and tell you and you and you and you get a script and you get a script, and like just shouting almost what it will feel like to, and writers who are unrepresented will recognize this feeling, like shouting into the void, and thinking like, will this ever happen for them? I don't care, we're going to keep going, blah, blah, blah. And then now into this period where people know me and my voice, which is lovely. People know my clients, and clients are sort of getting work without me having to bang the drum outside of a producer's house all night to get their attention. And like sort of learning about different types of work as well, because I will never ever personally ever stop taking on baby writers who have no credits to their names, who really excite me, because that's I feel that's the Edinburgh person in me that will always be there, that idea of like wanting to nurture you and take you, and the more my clients like progress and get their TV deals and their big theatre deals and blah, 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 like I can use all of that to help the next generation, or like the next younger writers and stuff like that. So it's just sort of learning about the duplicity of this job, how one side of it can be very much this and the other side is that, and making them spin around each other and act a bit like a, I love metaphors. My new metaphor is that it's a bit like a solar system, because like there's clients that feel very further out and like need pulling in, and there's the ones that are earth and live by the sun. God, this is why I'm not a writer but a writer's agent.
Oh, this is great. I love it. Wow, no, I love that metaphor. I love all these metaphors that have been coming up. Should write them in your memoir. And thinking the same kind of question, I guess, is like, how has the industry changed for good or for bad? Decade.
Yeah, it's definitely changed. That's I think I mean, when I was starting, the relationship between TV and theatre was I mean, I can't speak for before I was sort of in this agency, but it seemed like it was getting closer, and now it's so they're holding hands, they're like best friends, they're interchangeable. Producers and development execs are so aware of what the cross-pollination means. I remember in the early days, I've definitely had theatre producers saying to me like, why would it be beneficial for us to have TV execs come see our show, blah, 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 and not seeing that further goal? And that has totally changed now, which is so good, because as everyone has seen from like having the SVODs around and more shows that can be created, and authors being really at the center of them, it isn't about the medium as much as it is about the storytelling and your voice, so people can move around a bit more. What else has it changed? I think it's still when it comes to like representation, and by that I mean like global majority and not having everything be totally whitewashed. I think it is changing, and I say that with the knowledge that it's not changed, it's not done. Like that, there's definitely change. There's definitely pitfalls that people fall into. Like, yeah, it's I've said it for years. Like you have a foot in each camp. You want to have your foot in the camp where we need to make change because you need to recognise that you're currently not commissioning or listening to the voices of global majority. But then you also want to have your foot in the camp of we need to be done with this because this is such a basic approach to engaging with these voices, and recognise that you should be engaging with them because their voices are brilliant. They're in the room because they're a great writer, a director, whatever. I think that journey is still ongoing, but I think it's gotten a lot more layers and a lot more nuance. And again, with everything before that as well, but for the majority of people, what happened last summer has made those conversations easier to have, more accountability. And I also think maybe that's because people are allowed to make mistakes and not get cancelled and be in this sort of world where you can have a conversation about how fucked up this is and move and have the language. Like all the great authors out there, like Black authors out there who are writing books on like anti-racism and allyship, who've given us all the language, that is coming into, and I think that was not there 10 years ago. Or if it was in a very small pocket that didn't extend out to agents like me or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's a positive move, but it's not the end of a move.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was looking at I was like trying to remember what 2015 was like, and I was like looking up, this is so sad, but like, you know, you kind of remember about what shows are on. So I was like, what shows? Yeah. And it was shocking to see the lack of representation only just 6 years ago, and you know, whole seasons, and no one would really bat an eyelid. And so there has been change, but again, it's a difficult time, and conversations are both easier to have but also more fraught somehow. And it's tough. But before I kind of hand over to people for questions, just a couple more. You've already talked about, I'm really glad you touched on TV. That's the question I left out, but it seems extremely relevant because it is one of the biggest things that sort of changed this relationship between the two. And I think I went from, I mean, I haven't, you know, as you know, I haven't read anything for telly, but I think the desire before was like, I wasn't that interested, but it was more like, because there is more money, like it's double, you know, at least in the kind of very early stages. But now, like it is more of a desire from a creative place, because there is that relationship, and it is really exciting to see how, you know, voices and unique voices can be captured as a medium. So, you know, we've talked obviously about, you know, how you make that crossover, but I think everyone would probably, I'm assuming, would be interested just to know what does that journey look like for someone going from TV to TV? What are the pitfalls? How do you avoid them? You know, what kind of advice or what insight could you give us into that journey?
Yeah, I think it's obviously I can't speak to everyone's journey, but for me, there are sort of there are always going to be different routes, and there'll always be like the exceptions that prove the rule or disprove the rule. But and I would highly recommend, if anyone doesn't already, but like going on BBC Writers Room website, like they're brilliant for their interviews with writers and their script library, like that. Whether you do any of the paths into the industry or not, reading TV scripts, it makes it easier for your brain to work out the difference between a stage play and a TV play, a teleplay, without having to read countless books on how to write a script or all this type of stuff, which are useful, but it just makes it so it goes in easier, and it's a free resource, and it's brilliant, and it's stuff that gets made, right? And so but there are like steps into it, and it's not impossible, but like a lot of people do shadow schemes on TV series, or like getting into writing soaps and stuff like that as a sort of like real intense training ground. And you'll never work harder than when you work on a soap, because it's coming out weekly. You need to get those scripts written. The stories need to happen. If a cast member breaks their leg, like you have to do the rewrites to make sure that goes in, and it really gives you an insight into the larger scale collaboration that is writing for TV. So that's one option. But again, to feed into that option, step, route, whatever, you have to, in my opinion, you have to have your own spec script. And my advice, and again, sorry if everyone knows this or if you're already doing it, I don't want to tell anyone how to suck eggs, but my advice would be write a spec script that you would, in a dream world, want to create. Like, don't write it because you think this person is looking for an exact version of this or that. Like, it's again what I was saying about authenticity earlier, is like, your first spec script's never going to get made anyway, so you've got the freedom to create whatever you want, and that what you create and what you show that you've got on, you're the only one who can bring the ingredients that you bring to a page. So go hell for leather, like break form, break genre, do this, do that, whatever you think is exciting, as long as you know why you're doing it and why it's fun and exciting and what stories you want to tell and who you want to put in those stories. That's what's going to get development execs are basically just like you and like me. They want to read a good script. They don't care if it looks exactly like the half-hour format of a 60 minute. They'll help you shape that. It's about the voice. It's all about the voice. So you do need your spec script. Write it for you because it's your baby. Write it for you, and then you can use that to get into soaps and stuff, or you can try and use it to build relationships with execs. They'll need to read something else. They'll want to come and see your plays if you've got plays on and you're a playwright, obviously, and build the relationships. I've been quite lucky that a lot of mine have come over from theatre and been able to get original specs away because theatre forces you to have that authenticity of voice. Like there's a lot less from my observations of playwrights wanting to be like, this is what a play is, and it fits like this, and therefore the RSC will want to do it or whatever. Whereas in TV writers, you can totally understandably see why they would get caught in that trap of being like, we need to create what will fit for this channel or blah, blah. So when theatre writers come over, they often already have that sort of that streamlined into just creating what they think needs to be told. But it's all about the spec script. And if you can be the one who proves the rule and you can get a job on a show or get your own show picked up without a spec script, then honey, that's gold mine.
Do you know what? Like, I've heard this advice from you actually directly a few times, but I'm the kind of person that needs to hear advice like 3, 4, 5, 6 times for it to really like sink in. So I think, you know, when you were worried about saying stuff people already know, I think sometimes you do need to hear it again and again, from different perspectives for it to kind of really sink in.
Yeah, and it's shit, obviously. Like, no one wants to write anything on spec because
Yeah.
you're a writer and you're a professional and you want to get paid. And I totally understand that argument. And most of my job is fighting for that argument. But there's the other side of it where it's like what we're saying about directors. Without something to, any wares to peddle, you can't peddle them wares. So you've got to write the script. You've got to be in it to win it, sort of thing. And it is shit and it is elitist, because it means that if you haven't got time to dedicate to just writing, but and again, suck eggs, I don't want to teach anyone to, but all of my writers have other jobs, or the majority they have. And it's been really nice over this last 10 years seeing people come out and be like, actually, I've got to quit my job because writing's getting to that pace where I can only focus on this because I don't have time, but I'm making the money for it. But like having a side job or a day job, there's absolutely no shame in that. If anything, it makes you smart.
Yeah, it took me a while to like figure that was just what everyone was doing. Talk about it. So it's good to hear it, you know, from you too. Amazing. I've hugged you for long enough. I was supposed to stop a bit earlier, but I've got backup questions stored away. But yeah, thank you for answering all my questions and being so generous and kind with your expertise and knowledge and wisdom. But now over to you. If you want to ask a question, you can either just unmute yourself and go for it, or you can just put your name in the chat and I'll tell you to unmute yourself, or you can put a question in the chat. This is the section where everyone's a bit shy. There's a little bit of a quiet. Oh, yay, Catherine. Brilliant. I didn't even finish my sentence. Go for it.
Hi, hello. Thank you so much for that. I found it really rejuvenating because it's that time of year and it's still a bit depressing. I love your open-heartedness and real open-mindedness, because I've met agents who I felt were gatekeepers, and they say things like, you know, I'm not coming to a rehearsed reading, I'm only going to come to the full show. And you go, oh, okay, I have to direct that myself. Or, you know, you were saying that you do receive things in your email and you do keep that open, that open possibility to send things to you. Do you obviously like to go and see shows, of course, but you are willing to read a cold script as well as come to a rehearsed reading? Or
yeah, actually, this is a really, really good question, and thank you for asking it, because it's often when I do these chats, I forget that I'm not the only agent or the only age group of agent out there, and like I know exactly which group of agents you're talking about who say they won't come to a rehearsed reading, and because I know how busy they are, I totally empathize with them, and they're probably not looking to add to their list potentially, or at least maybe they're not looking to add to their list in the way that, as we were talking about, writers that will need that nurture, that push, that career guidance, compared to the writers that they'll just be doing contracts for. So it's always a balancing act. So my advice was, if you are getting those responses from an agent, then that's not where you're at. That's not the agent for you. And a big tip is always to, I actually had someone call a submission call us up, and they got me today. It was 6:15 and I was prepping for this, so I was still on the phone, and they were like, do you have a list of your young up and coming agents, the ones that are building their list? And I was like, you're so smart, because we don't at Berlin Associates, because we are quite small and we just had someone go off on maternity leave, so we're sort of a reduced team right now, trying to balance all that. But at the bigger agencies, yeah, and it's always a hot tip, and this is the hot tip that Carmen got 10 years ago, is go for the young agents, go for the junior agents. If you see anyone's name with the word assistant on it, go for them, because they are passionate, they've got the time, they want to prove themselves, they have all the contacts, they've got all the know-how. You don't get attached to an agent and assist them without learning a thing or two or 300. And I mean, we've got a young girl, Maddie, at Berlin Associates, who's been with us for 2 years. No, it must be more than 2 years, because the pandemic's almost 2 years. But generally, like, she's our sort of next generation, and she does a lot of these chats as well. And again, agents that come out to chats are often ones that want to chat and want to build their list and want to blah blah. And so yeah, I will read cold scripts. We all at Berlin Associates will read cold scripts, because we've been given that sort of benefit of the doubt from our higher ups all our lives, being like, your voice is why you're here, or your recognition of voices, whatever. So we will always read a cold script, and sometimes that can be just as exciting as going to see something. But yeah, it's hard, because I totally empathize, and it will get to a point where I will have to close my list and I won't be able to go and see new stuff and blah, blah, which I'm not at that point, because again, I don't ever want to get to that point. I want to have babies forever. But yeah, if you're getting that response, it's not the right agent, and maybe go and like Google other artists that you feel that are at the same level as you, or that they're getting more opportunities and you think they're at the same level, and see who their agent is, and then also maybe see who their assistant is, and go that way, because no one's just an assistant when it comes to agenting at all. But I also appreciate that's super frustrating to get those responses. So I apologize wholeheartedly on behalf of all of my agent brethren.
Thank you. It's a brilliant answer.
Amazing. Thanks, Alex. And Tilly's next.
Hello, thank you. This is all really interesting. My question is related to ghosting and related to like the response back from people. So I had a very bad experience when just very after I graduated. This was, like, oh my God, it's like nearly 10 years ago, where like I got approached to send something to an agent and then never heard anything back, and like did the thing where you follow up after a few weeks and or you give like then 6 whatever, and it just kind of like really messed with my head, especially since I was so green and so young. Like if that happened to me now, I'd just be like, oh, that's like the industry. But then and so I've never really, anyway, so I don't know if oh my gosh, I just did it's not a question, it's a comment.
No.
What are your thoughts on kind of like that situation, or like the non-responsiveness, or stuff like that, essentially.
No, I fully appreciate it, and also I apologize to anyone out there who is currently in my inbox who feels like they're being ghosted, because like because I have lovely people like Carmen and people, I get people coming to me personally all the time, and I've just taken a month off to get married and have my honeymoon, so I am so behind on everything, so behind, like, so I'm probably ghosting so many people, and it keeps me up at night. And every Friday night I'm on the sofa with a glass of wine, and I almost tweet out every Friday night, if you're in my inbox and you haven't heard from me, I'm coming. Like that'll be why, like, and every time you chase up an agent, like, a non-response is not a no, and like we welcome being chased up and being reminded, and it's sort of like what we do as agents when we do have you with execs and producers, like we're sending a script out and sometimes you don't get a response but you persevere. It's sort of like we're just passing the pain down the line, really. Like once you have an agent, we take that pain for you. But yeah, keep going. It's never personal. And no, even a no isn't a no, because you don't want to sign up with someone who's not right for you or doesn't have space for you, and you'd have a frustrating relationship because they're too busy. So every no takes you one step closer to a yes, and you're always within your rights to follow up with an email that you didn't get a response on. And like Carmen was saying earlier about how hearing something 3 or 4 times helps it sink in. You know this now. Like, I'm telling you, because you know this, but your greener, younger self was hurt by it, and I can totally understand that, and that's why it's so stressful to carry the weight of wanting to look after everyone and not having a cloning machine. But yeah, persevere and don't take it personally. And what's that? There's a really good quote about, like, it's none of your business what other people's opinions are of you. So if someone is ghosting you because they don't like your work or they don't think you're high enough up, like, well, screw them. Like, go and find someone who does value you and is willing to be in it for the journey.
That's all really useful to hear, and it's stuff that, like, I definitely have needed to, like, process or whatever. But I guess now that, like, I've been doing this for almost 10 years, I wouldn't describe myself as like necessarily like an emerging or a new kind of, like, you know, like, I've been making work all of this time. It just, like, never. So it's sort of like there's something about being, like, freshly graduated or fresh, you know, like feeling like a baby writer, as you were describing. And I definitely don't feel like that now. So it feels like a different way of approaching the situation anyway. And I just, and like, so what would you say for people who are a bit older now, or a bit more like, it's not established is maybe, established maybe is the word.
No, I know exactly what you mean. But I think in this case, it's a case of, and this is very personal to you, reevaluating what you're asking for and who you're asking. Like, are you approaching the same person that you thought was grand 10 years ago, or are you researching, as I was saying to Catherine, like other people who are assistants who are hungry, or and also, if you are managing to crack on without an agent and you're still not finding an agent, then screw it, and you get to a certain level and the agents will find you, which is a shit catch-22. It's that catch-22 of, like, well, you can't have a job here until you've got an experience, but can't experience until you get a job here. But again, maybe going back to the drawing board and looking for something different or someone different.
I mean, I must admit, I haven't, like, it's not like I spent all of the time in between, like, doing, I just kind of put it like in a too hard basket. I
always say that, like, for the most part, you know you need an agent when you know you need an agent. Like, when you're getting to that point, it's not that your struggle shouldn't be to find representation. Your struggle should be to find inspiration for this next play. Even if you're writing a play and no one's reading it, no one's producing it, it's still IP that's in your bank, and it's your wealth, right? And if you can get a production here or there, or go and meet directors, like, there's loads of theatres, this one included, that have a really good community where you can make your creative peers and sort of form things like that. And there's so many writers that still crack on and do stuff off their own back and through their own connections. So I mean, but obviously that's not if you need an agent, it's when you're like, oh shit, I've got this deal that I just don't understand, or I
had a really difficult
completed this
contract
level and I need to do
situation
next.
this year. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, so like, I, not to completely undermine my job, but if you don't need us, don't worry about us. You know what I mean? Like, they will 100% come like flies when you're successful, and you'll be like, where were you guys when I wanted an agent and I really needed help with this contract back in 2021 and blah blah blah. But that's always the way, isn't it? But yeah, don't agenting is a really weird job, because it can feel like a legitimizing factor. Like, it feels like you're only legitimate when you have an agent, which I'm going to call bullshit on right now, because like, you're a writer when you're writing when you're creating new work, and it can get a bit distracting, this idea of finding legitimacy through someone else. And again, I'm saying this knowing all of the value that I put into relationships with writers, and all agents do, but it's that sort of balancing act where it's like, okay, well, it's out of your control sometimes getting an agent or getting XYZ, so focus on the things that you can control. And there are always new agents coming through, and the people that, even if you don't want to approach a younger assistant junior agent now, in 5 years, 3 years time, they'll be bigger and bolder, and do you know what I mean? Like, so the industry is always changing. And I think what Catherine was saying, and sometimes what I feel with myself, is the people that, the size of my door, God, these metaphors are weird, but the size of my door is probably smaller now than it was 10 years ago, because I have a really full list and they're all doing really well, and I'm blah, blah, blah. So my capacity to take on new people is smaller, but and everyone's door sort of changes. And yeah, I'm going to abandon that metaphor, but I hope you know what I mean.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Tilly. And yeah, keep the metaphors coming. I'm really enjoying them. They're great. They're really good. We've got two questions lined up. One from Zoe, and then Robert, you can go after. Zoe, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. Hi. Sorry, I can't see myself. Can people see? Yeah. Oh, hey. Thanks so much, Alex. Yeah, this is kind of a similar question to Tilly, actually, which is just, when is the, I mean, sorry, it's like a golden question, but like, when is the right time to approach an agent? And I think something that I struggle with is like, is the conversation ongoing or not? Because it feels sometimes when agents, and you do sound very different, to be fair, Alex, but sometimes agents say, you know, send us your best script, which feels like a very chicken and egg, because you're just going to keep getting better. And also, you know, as Catherine pointed out, they're like, we want to come and see a show. Well, I haven't had a show on for fucking 2 years. It's been pandemic. Do you know what I mean? It's like, after hearing you speak, I'm sure everyone listening feels the same. It's like, I would just love to send you a piece of work. But one, if you don't like that, is the conversation closed? Probably, let's be real. So how can you judge when you're ready to approach? And yeah, I guess that's the question.
Yeah, there was a first part of the question that I wanted to answer, and I've forgotten what it was. But yeah, I think it is hard, because, as Carmen will attest, when you're under commission as well, there's never a finished draft until, sometimes not even until the curtain goes up. Like, you can always edit and edit and edit, and that is it's like the missing Dante's circle of hell that no one ever writes about, is just constantly redrafting, right? And I think there is a sort of yeah, we were talking about this as well, Carmen, like the sort of, once you get comfortable with, and this is sort of a long way of answering your question, once you get comfortable with that shit first draft, because it's always going to be shit, you can do anything. And it's the same when it's considering your work and when it's ready to send out. If you can like sort of bear to accept that it's not perfect, but you have done everything that you can do, and you recognize that it's always a collaboration. So if it needed to be changed in the third act, or it needed to be set in a swimming pool, then that would be something that a director or a producer would bring on board. And this is honest and true to where you are. I do think it's difficult when you're sending work out there and it's not getting an immediate response, and more often than not, it's genuinely because of the schedule of the person that you sent it to. Like, my wonderful client Ross Willis, he was emailing me when I was bridesmaids to my sister, and like God, this is going to go on the internet, but she'll never watch it. Bridezilla, and I didn't have any fucking time to like do anything extracurricular, which unfortunately sometimes reading submissions is extracurricular because your job first and foremost is to your current clients. And he like, I mean, he's brilliant. And to think that I either didn't respond to him or was like, oh, I don't have time, and like emailed him and was like, I don't have time right now, blah, blah. And to think that I would have missed out on Ross. Like, so it's not, it goes two ways sort of thing. So I would never consider the conversation closed unless you get an email that says, oh, thanks, but you're not for us, which is fair enough as well. Because like if you're emailing someone and they're more into TV and you're not TV yet, or they're more into comedy and you're like a political satire writer, or whatever, like, so yeah, it's hard, but perseverance. Like, and I say this to some of my writers, you've got to sort of be in it for the hustle and appreciate that you're not always going to be at this stage, and to just really not look at it and as if you're looking down a really, really long road and that's your life and then you're going to die, because it's always going to be like this, because it's not going to be like that. It's gonna, there's writers on my list who I'm like, but enjoy this moment where you're still being asked to go in for general meetings in TV, because you're getting to that point where you're never going to do a general meeting again. You're going to be like in demand, of people are going to want your ideas immediately, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like pushing that boulder up the hill, and once it's over, it's rolling down the other side. And it's the same with this sort of search to find representation or search to find your other collaborators, because agents, as Catherine was saying, like some agents do present themselves as gatekeepers, and in a way you are, because as an agent you do open more doors, but there are so many other people. You've got to consider it more as like who are your creative collaborators in this world, and one could be your agent, another could be your director friend, others could be your writer friends, others could be like Neil from the Finborough. Do you know what I mean? Like there's people out there. It's not all in one sort of size fits all, and there are people out there that can help you push your career forwards, and you can get so much value from that. So I guess it's just another way of saying, like, don't feel as if you're not legitimate as a writer just because an agent hasn't bitten your hand off, and do keep that conversation going if you want to. If you didn't like how they responded to you and you thought they were a bit dismissive, then fuck them. Like, you know, like there are so many agents out there, literally fuck them.
Thanks, Alex.
More great advice. Thank you. And another metaphor that you snuck in there. No one noticed. I did. We're coming towards the end, so there's one more question, and it'll probably be the last question. And Robert, do you wanna unmute yourself and ask the question? Oh, I think he's not here anymore. Oh no!
Yeah, I can't see him, Robert. But
it's a ghost question. Well, does anyone have a question, a burning last question they want to ask? Anyone? I always like to give a few chances, just in case.
Can I ask what Alex's email is, or is that really, really cheeky? I feel like everyone here wants to know, but also this is being recorded, so that's fair if you don't want to give it.
Oh, my email address is on the internet, so that's fine. But it's my in trouble name, Alexandra C at berlinassociates.com. But I'd also recommend submissions at berlinassociates.com, because I am not the only agent at Berlin Associates, and I'm not the only agent who's taking on writers. And as I said before, there's a younger, fresher version of me, and her name is Maddie.
Well, I've met, and it's really lovely, so I'd recommend.
Maddie's great. She looked after you while I was away, didn't she? Yeah. So and talking about I would welcome emails, but also if everyone emails me, I am going to an early grave of stress that I'm letting everyone down. So fight it out is what I'm saying.
Oh, we do have a final question. It's from Jane. Jane, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, Alex.
Hi.
This is a really weird question, but I'm just curious. So I have lots of friends, okay, who like are always kind of saying, oh yeah, you know, I speak to my agent every week, or I ring them every couple of days, and they just seem to talk all the time. Whereas I'm awful. I kind of drop into a black hole for 6 months and then like pop up with my news. And I just wondered, do agents have kind of like, do you have a preference? Is it annoying when people constantly contact you for no reason, or does it help keep your name on their name, on your lips, so that when you're coming up, because obviously you must have clients that are going for the same job. So is it better to keep in touch? I'm just really bad that if I've got nothing to say, I just don't know what I would say. So
I think that I think that's absolutely fine, because again, as the sort of theme of this is agents are really busy. So if you don't have anything to say, then why would you say anything? So that's totally legit. And again, I always suggest that you meet more than one agent when you're looking for representation, and go and sit for coffee with them or something, so you can get a feel of them, and if there's a good sort of relationship there. Because I've noticing colleagues and other agents I know from other agencies, how they're, this is so rude, but how when you're walking through a park and you see a person with a dog and you're like, oh my God, that dog is just like its owner. Very similar with agents and their clients. So you'll often find that their personality types, like how they like to stay in contact, whether it's like big long emails or long phone calls or WhatsApp, or like some clients have, not on my list, but some clients have started sending voice notes because that's new technology, which is interesting. I personally, it has to be an email, because I have literally no recall whatsoever. Like, it's like a goldfish. If it's not written down, I have no idea. If, like, I mean, there's a note over there with my name on it. Like, that's how bad I am at recall. But like, there's certain things where certain agents would rather, if you're having a contact with a client who you've got shorthand with, it might as well be over the phone, because it saves you writing another email, because all you do is write emails. So it's just about finding that thing. And I to the competition comment, I would say I wouldn't worry about that at all personally. I mean, I only have experience of working at Berlin Associates and not some of the sort of larger agencies, but I think that when it comes to competition, you're never in competition, because you're the only person that can create your script, and like, people are always just constantly getting to know your voice, and maybe you don't get a gig, but it's not because you weren't speaking to your agent, and you've got to have the confidence that they're putting you up for the right jobs and putting you on their list. But, and again, similarly, like the idea of competition of if this agent already has a writer like Jane Wainwright, would she want another one, or would we be in competition? It doesn't really work like that, because your taste is going to be similar, and it means that you get more of an expertise in servicing certain types of writers or mediums or whatever. So I think, yeah, communicate, find a balance whichever way you're communicating. And I have a client who loves to call me, and sometimes I just can't take the call, and then she thinks I'm dead, and I'm like, it's just because I'm writing you an email. So it's just working out. It's like having friends or dating someone. It's like working out what works for them and works for you. And if it isn't working, you should feel comfortable enough to say it's not,
That's great. That makes me feel much better for kind of, and I just say that Julia, my agent, is brilliant, and she does email me to make sure I've not died. But it's just the way I am. And then she'll suddenly get like 20 emails all in an hour, and then I'll disappear again for a long time. Yeah, I feel better now. Thanks.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. That was a great question, Jane. And yeah, thank you. This feels like kind of agent therapy, which has been really great. And yeah, you've been brilliant and so generous and open. And thank you so much. I feel like I've brought is this a metaphor? I don't know, or is it just an example? But yeah, like I've brought a really cool parent to class, and I'm like really proud. I'm like, oh wow. So yeah, thank you.
Now you know how I feel when like
I know I've got so much perspective. It's great. No, it's been really, really interesting. And yeah, thank you everyone for coming as well. I think we can yeah, it was a thank you, wasn't it? But yeah, maybe if everyone just puts their cameras on for the final sort of couple of minutes, it's always nice to see people's faces. If you need to dash, please do. But always lovely to see everyone, and thank you for your lovely questions. Oh, so lovely. I'm feeling quite nostalgic actually, because it's great to like yeah, have a drink in the Finborough at some point. Is that possible soon, Neil? I don't know, putting you on the spot.
But yeah, so do tell everyone about December.
Oh yeah, so December we have the next forum is going to be with Josh Azuz, the playwright, which is really exciting, and that will be on, oh my gosh, hold on, Again, I
13th,
can't remember.
I think it was the
13th,
13th.
it's Monday. Yeah,
Yeah,
Monday the 13th. Put that in your diaries. I'll send the announcement and the Zoom link and everything.
In terms of coming back live, we're being very careful with the COVID because I don't want to kill any of you. So at the moment, probably not this year. We'll see what the infection rate is like January. Definitely by the spring, hopefully January, February next year. But the theatre is open for performances. If you're double vaxxed, then you wear a mask. So come on down and see some shows. We've got Sugar House, which is a brilliant new Australian play, and then a David Island Great Britain premiere. So come along and check those out. And thank you, Alex.
Thanks for having us. I'm
much.
sorry I couldn't be there in person. It would have been so nice to like see faces
Go to the pub.
attached to bodies. But
One day
soon.
but yeah, round of applause, virtual round of applause. Thank you so much. This is the moment where we'd all go for a drink. Laura, I can see you've already got a drink, which is amazing. I'm going to do the same. But yeah, lovely to see everyone. Really, really lovely. And yeah, we're always sort of at the end of an email as well. If you have any questions or you want to email me, and I'll announce the date and stuff in an email soon. Yeah, have a look after yourselves and have lovely evenings. And it's a depressing time, but it's also a fun time. You know, it's festive season soon. So yeah, cool. Well, thank you so much.
thanks. Bye.
Bye. Bye. I'll catch up with you soon. Bye.